were expected to our own, let's see, understand. I cannot. Why is an indic identity necessary in the first place? An indic identity is necessary in the first place because unless and until you impute a certain identity to yourself, you allow outsiders to mold and fashion your identity. So today it is possible for anybody to get away with this nonsensical statement that India has always been a land of immigrants, and therefore there is absolutely no problem in having a second wave of immigration, regardless of what those hues may be, regardless of their origins, and what the implications could be for the future. This has been the nonsensical statement or narrative that's being peddled. So the absence of an identity or a vacuum with respect to your identity allows somebody else to cast and impose a certain identity on you. Which is why it is important for us to craft an identity for ourselves, and that is the indic identity. What is the meaning of an indic identity? Why are we not using any other term for it? Why indic in the first place? Because the word indic is capable of encompassing within its scope several ways of life, several value systems, not all of which may be able to live with each other. There is a serious difference between the Vedic way of life and the Jainic way of life and the Buddhist way of life. All of these need to be able to be assimilated in one particular basket, and the only basket that can do this is the indic basket. If you do not give this identity to yourself, take it from me in writing, you will find articles being written to the effect that there is not much of a difference between the United States of America and India insofar as it being a melting pot of multiple races and multiple cultures, and therefore there is no indic way of life, and there is nothing that is native to this particular land. And the moment you try and say there is something that belongs to this particular land, you will be branded a xenophobe, someone who has a problem with anybody entering this country. Which is why it is important for you to have an indic identity. That's point number one. But let's try and actually expand this issue a bit more. Can I walk around, or will I be less audible? Is it okay for me to walk around a bit? Yes, please, because I'm used to actually walking around when I speak. How many of you have followed the Sabarimala debate of entry or right of entry of women into Sabarimala? How many of you have followed it? Okay. And how many of you have followed the discussions on TV with respect to Sabarimala, on NDTV or any other place? Most of you, I'm hoping that most of you have actually seen it. There is always a tendency to pit Hindu religious institutions against women and give the distinct impression that by default, Hindu religious institutions are patriarchal in nature, and women are treated as inferior or second-grade institutions, and that's the manner in which this discussion goes about. Why is this important, and what is the significance of this is this. Every discussion that you view on television or any platform which has a fair amount of impact or a fair amount of access is to a normal person independent of somebody's ideology. Most people who read newspapers or who watch news do not understand that the person who's peddling that particular news or who's actually pushing that particular narrative has a certain agenda. Consequently, it comes to a point that unless and until you're in a position to have access to an ecosystem that ventilates your point of view or pushes your agenda, you will always be in a position where you'll be seen as a minority, as a fringe, or as a non-intellectual base. How many of you associate, okay, until it comes, I actually have to move on because I have an energy which needs to be disseminated. Oh, it's recording, okay. Every time you watch a debate on television, let's say on NDTV, you'll always find three articulate people speaking immaculate English, representing a certain point of view, and anyone who represents the indic standpoint or the indic point of view will be a person who is inarticulate, who struggles with English, and who will come out as a person who is a misogynist of the first order, who is a patriarch of the first order. Have you wondered why this is the case? This is simply because In my limited experience, when I've taken part in NDTV debates, I've seen that there is a calculated attempt to push a certain stereotype with respect to the indic point of view, and we are also partly responsible for this. You speak of gay rights, you speak of tribal rights, or you speak of rights of women. The indic standpoint is never there at all. The indic position never finds any ventilation at all. You're not seen.
People who are called depend on the channel, right?
Correct.
So they might choose such people who will kind of support their.
That's exactly my point. I don't know if I'm still audible.
Yes, it's fine.
Volume? No, there it's not still. Okay. You're right. That's exactly what happens.
You can walk now.
I'm not sure it's still connected to the camera. Is it? Okay. There's no connection with that camera. I'll use this one. Yes, sir. Repeat your question again, please. Yeah. Yes, they decide. So this is what I would. Right.
Why do the people who are called come there? If they know that.
There's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. If I know for a fact that I'm going to be outnumbered in a discussion with people from the other side of the ideological fence, it's all the more reason for me to go there. Otherwise, the impression that most audience will get is that this is the only point of view that exists and there is no alternative point of view. Notwithstanding the fact that I'll be isolated or I will be a minority voice as far as that particular discussion is concerned, I'm hoping that people get to hear even my point of view before they form an opinion on that particular issue. I understand. Now, right. It's here. I'll put it this way. I may call a certain person knowing fully well that he is going to be inarticulate and he will succeed or he will help me pushing a certain point of view that these are the people and these people fundamentally represent a sample which is inarticulate. But I can't stop a person who wants to appear before a television channel to put forth his point of view, notwithstanding the fact that he knows for a fact that he is not the best person to represent that point of view. Ultimately, it boils down to one thing. I need to be absolutely aware of the fact that am I the right person to represent a certain point of view on a public platform? If I am not articulate enough, or if I don't have the skill set, or if I'm not informed as far as that particular issue is concerned, I must desist from going there because I'm not just hurting my own reputation, I'm also hurting the reputation of the position that I stand for. Unfortunately, there's nothing that you can do. You can't stop people from appearing on television studios. You can only try and create more voices which can reach out to public, independent of what is being shown on television channels.